All right, let's talk about one of America's loudest, proudest, and most powerful musical inventions, Southern rock. We're going to plug in, turn up the volume, and figure out exactly how this incredible sound came to be.
So, just imagine for a second that you're in a studio trying to cook up a totally new kind of music. You start with two main ingredients. First, you grab the raw, gritty, soulful feeling of the blues. Then, you stir in the honest storytelling you hear in country music. Pretty cool mix, right? But what if you added just one more thing?
Yeah, that's when you get something completely new. Something that wasn't just a simple blend, but a high-energy, thundering sound that would go on to define a whole generation. You get Southern rock.
Okay, so to really get this sound, we've got to look at its musical DNA. Let's break down those two main ingredients that make up the whole recipe for Southern rock.
You know, it's kind of amazing how perfectly these two styles fit together. From the blues, Southern rock got all that raw emotion, especially in those wailing guitar solos and the super expressive vocals. And then from country, it grabbed the whole idea of telling a story with the lyrics. You know, songs about life, family, and just being outdoors. Plus all those catchy melodies you can't help but sing along to. It was really the perfect mix of soul and story.
And one of the coolest things they borrowed from those early blues masters was the slide guitar. It's this awesome technique that creates that incredible, wailing, almost voice-like sound you hear in so many classic songs. Honestly, it's probably one of the most recognizable sounds in the entire genre.
Okay, so we've got the recipe. But what about the tools you use to actually cook it up? Let's take a look at how these bands built their massive, signature wall of sound.
Now, this was not your average four-person rock band. The absolute key here was the guitars. We're talking about bands with two or sometimes even three lead guitarists all playing at once. You back that up with a super powerful driving beat from the drums and bass, and then you add in some piano or organ for extra texture, and you've got an absolute powerhouse of a band.
So what do you do with all those guitars? Well, this is where their secret weapon comes in. Dual guitar harmony. It's a technique that takes an incredible amount of skill because the guitarists have to be perfectly in sync with each other. But when they nail it all, it creates this unbelievably rich and complex sound. It literally sounds like the guitars are singing a duet.
So now, let's meet the architects themselves. We're going to look at two of the most important bands who took this recipe and these instruments and basically defined the entire genre for the rest of the world.
First up, you have to talk about the Trailblazers, the group that most people agree was the very first true Southern rock band, the Allman Brothers Band.
These guys were just on a whole other level, musically. They came from Macon, Georgia, and they had this wild setup with not only two lead guitarists, but two drummers. That created this super thick, rhythmic foundation for everything else. They were famous for going off on these long, improvised jams, where they just explore the music live on stage. And if you want proof of their talent, their live album, At Fillmore East, is still considered one of the greatest rock albums of all time, period.
And next, we've got the band that took that Southern rock sound and turned it into huge global anthems. I'm pretty sure you've heard of them, Lynyrd Skynyrd.
So, if the Allman Brothers were the pioneers, Lynyrd Skynyrd were the superstars. They took that whole dual guitar idea and cranked it up even more, creating this gigantic sound with three lead guitarists. Yeah, three. Their songs like Sweet Home Alabama became these massive anthems about Southern identity, and they took this music that started in Florida and made it a worldwide phenomenon.
Okay, so that was the golden age back in the 1970s. But what happened to this huge sound? And maybe more importantly, why do we still care about it so much today?
Well, the story of Southern rock kind of follows a classic path. It was born in the late 60s, it absolutely exploded in the 70s with huge tours and hit records, and then by the early 80s, other styles started to take over the radio. But the sound didn't just disappear, not at all. It evolved, and you can still hear its influence loud and clear today.
And really, that's the most important thing to remember. The original era might be over, but its DNA, the loud guitars, the storytelling, the whole attitude, it just kind of soaked into other types of music and found new ways to live on.
So what's its legacy? Well, it's huge. Just listen to a lot of modern country music, that heavier rock and roll edge with the driving drums and harmonizing guitar solos. Yep, that's the Southern rock DNA right there. The insane skill of those guitar players also set a really high bar for rock musicians everywhere. And maybe most importantly, these bands proved that music from one specific part of the country could tell stories that connect with people all over the world. And it's not over. Bands today like Blackberry Smoke are proudly carrying that torch for a whole new generation.
So, the next time you've got music on, Listen a little closer. From the twang of a guitar to the story in the lyrics, you might be surprised where you hear that Southern rock echo. Which leads to one last question for you to think about. What modern music do you hear the South in today?